What a great group. I do training courses all across the globe, and I've already been very impressed with you folks. You're asking questions, you're asking really good questions, and you're just asking questions. When I do training in Spain, or some parts of China, they just sit there and they write, and they write, and they write, and it's the most boring experience in my life to be sitting and training or giving a lecture for 2 hours when people are just taking notes because they don't want to miss something that might be on an exam sometime or something. So the whole interactive part of training is something that I really enjoy. Okay.
Yeah.
And thank you for the introduction. It was very nice. I'm thrilled to be here. I've been mediating now for just around 30 years. I started in Canada in family mediation, divorcing spouses, and then got into workplace mediation. I did some community mediation. Workplace I really enjoy. I enjoy that the most. And now as an ombudsman with the United Nations, I do international work. So a lot of it has to do with workplace as well, because people working everywhere in the world with the United Nations, and imagine they don't all get along. So you can imagine how many problems that there might be. I just love technology. I also hate it.
It's Lexa, no? Lexa D. What document?
Oh,
Role of
no.
Bangladesh too.
Yeah, that one. That's PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to be talking to you about the role of the mediator, what we do as mediators. Somebody asked earlier, about an hour ago, can I mediate? I think it was over here. Can I mediate after taking this course? Did somebody ask that question?
Yes.
Yeah. And the answer was yes, you can. My suggestion, though, is if you're going to start mediating, do co-mediation with someone else that has been doing mediation for a long time. As I said, I've been doing it for over 30 years, and I learned something new in every single mediation. No two mediations, out of the hundreds and hundreds of mediations that I've done, no two are the same. You're dealing with personalities, you're dealing with cultures, all sorts of different elements play a role when you're mediating. So if you have the opportunity to find a mentor, to find somebody else that's been mediating for a while and co-mediate with them, you'll learn a lot as well, because this is it's an evolving field. And I took all my courses at the very beginning, then I continue to take courses and I teach courses, but there's always something new to learn. And I was learning today from Iran when I was listening to the RTC. RTC. I hadn't heard that acronym before, so I thought that was a neat addition as well. Have you ever seen this picture before? Well, take a look at it. What do you see?
Girl.
Sorry?
Girl.
A girl. A young girl or an old woman?
One young girl.
A young one?
Young girl.
Does anybody
And old woman.
Old woman? Oh, do I need this? Can you hear me back there without this?
Yes. I think you can use it
Both.
I'd rather
so
not.
that it's being recorded, video recorded.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I wish I didn't know that.
You can keep it.
Okay. So what do you see? Young girl.
Old woman.
Old woman. Does everybody see a young girl? Does everybody see an old woman?
Yes.
It's a art picture.
Yes.
My answer is picture.
Oh, okay. I see a picture. Very good. Very good.
Young girl.
Young girl. Okay, so let me show you two different things. Here is a picture of an old woman with the large nose, the chin. There's her mouth, and that's the bonnet on her head. for the life of me, I can't see the, oh, there we go, okay, now I see the young girl, okay. This eye is no longer an eye, this is just a
Yeah,
hair.
yeah.
And here's her
Yeah,
face,
yeah.
that's the nose
Yeah.
and the jawline.
Ooh.
Why am I showing you this?
Oh, old now.
You can see them now. Why am I showing you these?
The perspectives.
Point of view.
Perspective, point of view, exactly. And that is what the mediator's role is, helping people to identify their perspectives and having them share their perspectives with the other person. So that's all I have to say, I'm finished. Okay, there's a bit more. But in a nutshell, that's exactly what we do as mediators, helping them come up with what their interests are, helping them determine, be able to see the other person's perspective. You know, I show people all the time, or tell people all the time that we work on trying to help one person see the other person's perspective. And 9 out of 10 times, the people's responses, no, they're just lying to you. There's no way that they could have seen it that way. You know, I have 2 people, I meet them individually on my first meeting. One of them tells me that this and this and this happened on that day a year ago when this conflict started. I then meet with the other, wow, it was a fly. I then meet with the other person. It likes me. Yeah. I then meet with the other party, and then that party then tells me a completely different version of what happened. I'm sitting there, were you in the same room when this happened? It's like as if they weren't in the same room. Neither one of them is lying to me. They both see it so very, very differently, and that's the difference there. I want to talk about negotiation. Aram mentioned negotiation earlier, and there's 2 types, as I see it, main types of negotiation. There is competitive or distributive. That's one type. That's when you're cutting up a pie to split it up amongst people. You're just dividing an equal division of whatever the property or the issue is. And then there is collaborative or integrative, when they find ways together to come up with another way of splitting, dividing up this pie, or what have you. Have you ever used or seen the example of the orange?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So somebody that doesn't know what's really going on, hasn't talked to them, they'll just cut the orange in half and give half to each, and neither one of the parties is satisfied. With dividing a pie, you know, somebody gives you a pie, and there's 3 people in the family, or 4 people that want it, you can just cut it into 4 pieces very easily. That is distributive. That is how one way of negotiating works. The other way is integrative and finding out other ways, what's going on. One of the people that wants a piece of pie is 5 years old. Do they get the same size as the 30-year-old? Another person is 80 years old. Does she want a piece of pie? One other person has allergies to that pie. One other is on a diet. You know, there's all sorts of factors that may play a role in coming to a conclusion or a negotiation or a settlement. Now I'm just giving a very basic example. A much larger example, if I can get a little bit political, there is a president of the United States. I think we all know of him. And he has been a real estate agent all of his life. And now he's the president of the United States. His methods of negotiation are all distributive. He says, we will give you this sanction, we will divide this, and he doesn't care what happens. He doesn't care about the relationship, or at least it doesn't appear that he does. He makes new friends with countries that the United States has been at war at for years, and he marginalizes or pushes away old allies that have been friends of the United States for many years. He doesn't care or seem to care about relationships. And if you don't care about the relationships, a distributive bargaining process can be used. But here in mediation, the whole idea is that there's some form of a relationship between the parties, and they want to maintain or at least not destroy the relationship that they currently have. So, the example of the pie. How do we find out what the other person wants?
To listen to them.
By discuss.
Listen to them,
Discussing with them.
discussing with them, asking questions. That's the biggest thing. Asking really good questions that don't end up with a yes or a no answer. Some people, that's all they'll give you anyways. Anybody have teenage children? And if you ask them, how was your day? Fine. Pretty standard. It's a pretty standard response because they'll talk to their friends and everybody else, but they don't talk to you. Okay, well, that's just me. Yeah, competitive and distributive. There's a formula that we use in mediation, and this is not it. This is competitive. Sorry, this is a competitive or distributive. Yes. Here's the problem. You had a discussion on what are you going to do with it. You talk about the solution. So how many pieces do we cut the pie into? And then you're done. And then this is a collaborative or integrative approach. You look at the problem, you do not go immediately to a solution. You look at the problem, find out what the interests are, and how do we do that?
Ask questions.
Asking questions, exactly. And you have that collaborative conversation with the other party, or they have it with each other, and then you come up with the options. Then you come to the solutions. It is so easy. Do I really need to use it? No. No, good. Thank you. It's so easy to jump to the solution. I'm a guy, and my gender is famous for doing this. And use a gender example. How many women in this room will go home at the end of a day and see their partner and tell them they had a really bad day because their boss did this or somebody did this? And your partner says, well, why didn't you do this? You should have done this. This is what you should do tomorrow. Does that ever happen?
Yes.
Does it always happen? Does it happen a lot? Because we're hardwired to give solutions. My buddy comes up to me and says, there's something wrong with this car. Do you have gas in it? Are the tires full of air, whatever. I'll give solutions because that's what he wants to hear from me. A very bright woman who used to be in my life many years ago said to me, Kevin, I want you to fix the stove, the car, not me. I learned from that. I learned that, you know what she wanted me to do? She wanted me to shut up and listen to her. She wanted to talk about what was happening in her day. She wanted to tell me, and for me to have empathy, actively listen to her, and if it gets to a point where, are you looking for my advice? Good, because I've been dying to say it for the last half an hour, but no, of course not. So I learned that a long time ago that listening is such an important thing to do, and that's what mediators do. We have to listen, and when we hear things come out, we have to be curious and ask questions about what's going on. I want to. I'm going to write a word, 6 letters.
Is it okay?
It's an acronym. If you take those letters, those 6 letters, and switch them around, there are 2 other words that they will spell.
Silent. For the first one.
Silent is one of them, yes.
And
Enlist.
Enlist.
Enlist. Very good. You taken this course before?
No, I'm an arbitrator, not a mediator.
And enlist. When I used to mediate with the Canadian military, That's the one that they would come up with first, enlisting into the military. But that's becoming involved and being silent. How are you feeling?
Very hard. But it's very common at home in the evening. Keeping silence.
Keeping silent. Being silent, I can guarantee you, if you're the mediator and you're in a room and you just stop talking, they feel a lot more uncomfortable than you do. And that is an opportunity that mediators use by using silence to get them to answer, to get them to come up with more information, to get them to tell you what their real interest is. If you ask a question, tell me about your priorities with regards to why you're here today, and they don't give you an answer immediately, don't change the question. Just be silent. You'll be amazed at what you'll hear from people just because you're being silent. Now, I'm here to talk about the role of the mediator, and the role of the mediator, as I see it, there's two roles. One is to be the mediator during the mediation, and to speak with people, getting them prepared. But the other really huge role that I use is a conflict coach. I meet with each client, and over 80% of my job is done before I bring the people into the rooms. Why do you think that is? Hey, 80% of my work is done individually with my clients before bringing them into the room together. Why such a large percentage?
Because they vented out their built-in whatever grouses that they had. So now
Because
they can think rationally when they come together, and probably they calm down a bit.
They have vented out what's going on,
Yeah.
and now that they can possibly come more calmly. Yes.
And listen to other person's perspective.
And listen to the other person's perspective. The biggest difficulty as a mediator you'll find is getting people to listen to the other person.
Yeah.
Right.
They just want to talk. They want to go and talk. And you made a very good point, venting. A huge chunk of my job is listening to people, because oftentimes somebody will keep saying the same thing over and over again. It's because they don't feel that they've been heard. They don't think anybody's listening to them. Nobody's hearing what their side of it is. And once they do get the chance to speak, wow, it's really, well, that looked a lot different. Wow. Well, the formatting is gone, but that's okay. Actively listening. Ram mentioned that earlier, so I won't go into that. Being curious, remaining curious, paying attention to the body language. We've talked about all of this, or Ram talked about all of this morning. So very important. And when you're dealing with one person one-on-one, this is what you're doing. You're also teaching them how to do it. If you're modeling mediation for them, you'll be doing all these things, and hopefully they will be able to come to the point where they're able to do that when the two parties come together. I said 80% of my time is spent with the conflict coaching, and that's because that's a realistic number, and that's because it takes a while with a lot of people before they're ready to listen to what the other person has to say. It's reflecting the emotions of the person. If you're in a meeting with them and one of them starts to cry, what do you do as a mediator?
To show some empathy.
How do you do that? Absolutely, but how do you do that? There's a lot of ways of doing it. You're in a mediation. front people get picked on all the time. You're in a mediation, and I'm the mediator, and you start to cry.
Ouch.
No, not at all, not at all. You recognize it, and you put it on the table. It's obvious that you're quite upset right now. Do you want to take a couple-minute break and identify it, call it, mention what the emotion is that the person is doing. What's going on here? Sometimes somebody's just banging the fist. Well, I'm not into violence in a mediation, and this can be intimidating to the other person. So I'll say, are you able to? Remember we were talking about this in the private caucus, that when you bang on the table, the other person might not feel comfortable. I'm feeling a little intimidated when you're doing it. So is there a way we can have this conversation without you doing that? I'll own something like that. I don't have a difficulty, even if I see the other person, with that look of fear on their face. Summarizing, reframing, paraphrasing, all very important things to let the person know that they are being heard. So very important. If you have any questions as we're going through it, please let me know. One of the techniques, I really don't like the word techniques, one of the methods that I use is called shifting. Have you heard of that? No? When people come to you as a mediator, they're coming to you with their problems. They're coming to you with what's going on in their life and why their life is in such a disaster, and why the other person is the reason for their life being in such a bad situation. And what we do is let them vent, listen to them, ask them a ton of questions, and then help them to focus onto the future. Help them to move away from what happened to what might occur if things get better. Now, I've had people tell me that, for the last 6 months, my life has been horrible. I can't go to work, I lose sleep, I don't want to go in anymore, I don't want to see that person, it's just miserable. So I listen, and they talk, and they tell me all about what's going on. And then at one point, I'll say to them, so you said for the last 6 months, how long have you been working there? 2.5 years. So tell me about what it was like before this 6-month point. What was your relationship like with that person in the workforce before the 6 months? Or if that's not a situation, and then they're usually able to find something good to say about the person. And that's a big step, because this person comes in very, very angry at the other individual, and now all of a sudden they're saying something nice about the person. Or another question, which I use all the time, is, okay, how do you envision the workplace will be after the mediation? If this mediation is successful, what do you see life like then? Well, at least it's not going to be tense. It's not going to be, I won't be walking around on eggshells. I'm not going to be upset. I'll be able to get a good night's sleep, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these things that could make their lives better again. They're looking to the future. A huge step that the mediator needs to do to get the people to move forward. These were spoken about as well this morning. We talked about now as well, venting, communication skills, raising the issue. I've got a slide in a couple down talking about raising the issue. A lot of times as a mediator conflict coach, if it's an interpersonal conflict between two people at work or wherever in a community, and they don't know how to bring up the question, they don't know how to address it with the person they're in conflict with. I'll ask them, so have you talked about this with the person? Yes, it was a horrible conversation. So tell me about the conversation. Well, I went into his office, slammed the door, told him he was being a complete jerk, and I won't take this behavior, and it's equivalent to abuse of power and harassment. How do you think the person that he was talking to responded to that? How would you respond to that? Oh, I'm sorry, this is great. Let's sit down and have a nice little chat. Is that what you you would expect someone to say?
Just come down, sit down, take a chair, we'll discuss.
Sit down, have a chair. That's certainly a good approach to doing it. Oftentimes, people aren't that nice when they feel attacked or threatened, and they become defensive. And when they become defensive, it just blows out the window. I'm going to show you a format that I use with my clients. I've used with my clients over the years. It's just it's called DESC. It's taken from a nonviolent communication format. It's a 3 or 4 step process on how to approach somebody when you want to talk about a conflict, so that they don't become defensive. And there it is. 4 steps. D. Describe what you're seeing, hearing, and what the situation is. E. Effect. Explain the effect that behavior is having on you. State your preferred needs, and comment on the positive benefits or results for the both of you, not just for you. So it could be when we have meetings, I notice that you get excited and you bang on the table. When you're banging on the table, I'm feeling intimidated or threatened. I would prefer that you don't bang on the tables during the meeting. And can we sit down and have a conversation about this so that our meetings will be more productive? A lot better than the way the first person walked into the room. That's just a method, a very simple method, 4 steps that I've taught my clients to bring the matter to the other person, if they want to have it at that level. And a lot of people do. That's where conflict coaching comes in. Any questions? Just a different example. When I get interrupted, I feel frustrated. I would appreciate it if I could fully share my experiences or perspectives. So can we come up with the best decisions for this office? Just another slight variation on the theme. That I just love. It's called Peach BFBS. Has anybody ever heard of that? Did somebody say yes? Has anybody heard of the Peach BFBS? No. Okay, I would be very surprised if you had. Peach BFBS it was my cheat notes. My cheat notes that I used when I first started mediating. Imagine you're sitting in a room and you've got the 2 parties there, and all of a sudden you just go blank. You don't know what to say, you don't know what to do, and these people are paying you a good amount of money for your mediation skills, and then all of a sudden there's a way around that, and that's the Peach BFBs. What they are questions that work in almost any given situation. Let's use this classroom as an example. What are your priorities for while you're taking these 2 days in this class? What expectations did you have before you came to the course? What assumptions did you make when you found out some guy from Spain was going to come in here and give a session? What concerns do you have about spending this much time away from work or family? What are your hopes? What are your beliefs, fears, values? All very, very relevant, particularly in culturally diversified mediations. Those same questions can be asked of any other situation. If it's a workplace conflict, if it's a family conflict, community conflict, You know, tell me about your perspectives. Tell me your perspective on the situation. What were your expectations? What assumptions do you have? What are your concerns and your hopes? What beliefs do you have about the other person? What do you believe the other person was thinking when this happened? What are your fears with regards to being in the same room with the other person? What values might be impacted? And those were my cheat notes. I'm not kidding. I had them written down on a piece of paper, small enough that only I could see them, because I didn't want it to seem like I was rehearsed or anything else, but I was. And they just now come naturally. If you use them enough, they'll come to you naturally, and they're great open-ended questions. Have you talked about open and closed questions? Yeah. Good, because people in conflict, they will say yes or no most of the time, because they're in conflict. It's pretty common, pretty normal. With these questions, it is next to impossible to say a one-word answer. So tell me what your hopes for this course were.
Okay,
Sure.
you're asking me the question, sorry. So yes, although I had read about mediation, I wanted to understand it in details and get the perspective from different coaches and learn from their experiences as well, and
Okay.
what their real life experiences that they've got.
What's your perspective on mediation?
So mediation system now is a very well developing system because this system inherent because this system has the power very short time result without hazards both parties, and these three things are fully related in this terms win, win and win, because both parties can satisfy result.
Could you have answered that? Could you have answered that in a yes or no answer?
Simple yes or no.
Simple yes or no, exactly. Not possible, not possible. We talked about perspectives, and I want to show you a couple more examples of seeing different perspective. There's a post in the middle, and there's three lines, A, B, and C.
Sir,
Yes, what? Does A go to C, or does B go to C? A to C? A to B?
Both can go to both can go.
both can go.
Oh, how's that possible?
Or both don't.
It's not possible for both.
Point of view.
Sorry?
I think point of view, both the side may be right.
Perspective, point of view, exactly. How are you looking at it? Whether you're looking at it in one way or another way. I mean, when I look at it, it's very clear that A goes right up to C. Then I look at it slightly differently. No, it's very clear that B goes up to C. Perspective. You saw that one? What do you see? A cup?
No.
Sorry?
Never much.
Accused persons and victim. For camera trial.
Okay.
In
Yeah, it is-
camera.
Okay, let me give you a slightly different example. She claims that he sexually harassed her. He touched her inappropriately. He made a crude remark. He said something to her about her sex life, or he never stares at her eyes. He's always staring a little bit lower than that. And he's okay. He's an idiot. There's no question. In today's day and age, people know that they're not supposed to be doing that thing, but maybe he just didn't get it. And she walks up to him and says, "You know, when we were talking, I felt really uncomfortable yesterday because you were looking here the whole time, and we're at work. I don't think you should be asking me about my sex life. We're not that close. I don't I don't appreciate, even if it's a joke, I don't appreciate that. And he says, oh my gosh, I had no idea. You know, this is how I talk to my friends all the time. But if it bothers you, I won't do it again. Is that okay to resolve it that way? What do you think?
They talk to each other and
They talk
resolve
to-
it, why not?
Exactly. They talk to each other and resolve it. Doesn't go any further. That's solving a sexual harassment issue right at the very beginning. The next step could be mediation. If she comes to me and says that, you know, this guy keeps doing this in the office, and I just don't, he's my boss, I just don't know how to bring it up. I don't know what to say to him. I have no idea. Call for coaching, and then mediation if that's necessary. Now, I can't speak to Bangladesh and whether or not it's any different here, but I would think if my perspective is that every conflict can be resolved at the lowest level, and that lowest level is the two people talking to each other. If that doesn't work, you have to you go up the it escalates to a mediation or to the courts or to an investigation or what have you. But there's different steps that that we can take, and I don't think any longer that a sexual harassment case should be precluded if the parties want to do that. Okay. During my pre-mediation, I explain a lot of things to people to prepare them. After I've gotten to hear all their stories and everything else, I talk about my role, being neutral or impartial. I talk about the procedures, what they can expect, and of course all the other principles, confidentiality and such, that I don't represent, because even when I tell people, they still ask me my advice. I talk about terminating the mediation. I tell them that any one of us can terminate it at any time. But I ask them if they do want to just leave the mediation, don't just walk out the door. Give me 5 minutes of your time before you leave. We'll talk in private. I talk to them about their right to legal counsel, expectations during the mediation, all of this before I bring them together. And I do something as well as I will do my introduction at the beginning of the mediation to just as they were talking about earlier today. Then I get them to do an opening statement. What they would, and I coach them on this as well. I'd like you to spend just a couple minutes saying why you're here, what you'd like to achieve today, and how you'd like things to improve. And so we talk about what they might say and get them so that they're feeling good and it's going to be a positive start to the mediation. And then the other person will have the same opportunity. This morning, it was mentioned that usually it's the complainant that goes first. In workplace, family, community, and the courts, I do something a little bit different. I ask them who would like to begin. It's their first opportunity to actually agree on something. They've been fighting now for 2 years or however long. I'm giving them the opportunity to agree on something. So one person says, okay, I'll start, and I'll say, is that okay with you? Yeah, sure. They've agreed on something. It's a great way to start a mediation.
Sorry, do you also have an agreement to mediate? You have to sign that?
Yeah,
Like how we
I've got
have
I don't know what yours is like here, but we do have an agreement to mediate that just talks about it. It explains all the different paragraphs about confidentiality and all that sort of stuff.
sign
Yes.
that, yeah?
Yeah.
Before this.
And we use we call it minutes of settlement at the end, depending on.
Can you give an example of community mediation?
Sure. Dog's barking too loud. Dog's barking every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, and the neighbor hates him because he doesn't get home until 3 because he's a nurse in a hospital and he works shift. So he can't sleep, and because they let the dog out in the backyard and it just barks for an hour and a half. In Canada, Spain, and many other countries, the police use mediators. They don't want to go on calls to people's house because the dog's barking, or because the people upstairs walk around with their shoes on and it makes this banging noise on the floor all the time. Police don't want to deal with that. Come on. So there's community mediation centers. Okay. So after the pre-mediation, we're in the mediation session. And as an international mediator, I can't be everywhere. Nobody can afford that, and it's very, very complex to bring everybody in. So I do a lot of my mediations now on Skype. I'll meet with the people, and I'll do a lot of the coaching. I shouldn't say a lot of the mediation. A lot of the coaching is done on Skype. It's the one-on-one meetings that I have, and then we can either have a three-way Skype call, but I have to admit I'm not fond of that. You can't see if his fists are like this. You can't tell if the football game is on over his head, and if he's actually paying attention to the mediation, or if he's watching a football game. And when people are in their homes, the dog comes in, the husband goes by. It can be very disruptive, which is why I prefer in a room altogether. Yes. I reiterate everything that I told them individually and remind them both that I spoke confidentially with the other person. We do the agreement to mediate. We talk about collaboration versus competitive. Opening statements, caucuses, we talk about respect, self-determination. I make it clear no matter how many times I've told them, oftentimes they still ask me, so what do you think? Is this a good settlement? It's up to you.
So it's the same thing, non-binding, voluntary,
Yes.
all the characteristics are same?
Yes. Yeah. Non-binding unless it's
Settlement agreement.
no,
And how do
no,
you
no, no, no,
enforce-
non-binding unless it is what's the legal term? I forget. The judge approves it.
Yeah, so this
Yeah.
settlement terms, that's what I was going to ask you. What do
Yeah.
you do with that settlement term?
Well,
If it is private mediation?
yeah, if it's done by mediation and it's a workplace, I give it to them and they agree to it and they walk away, and I keep one for my file. If and like you said, you can only put in it regarding the people in the room. If it's a workplace and somebody says something about what their boss is going to do, well, that can't go in the minutes unless he's or she is here present. So it'd be that you will do this on this date, and the other person like that. And if there is something in there that applies to somebody else, like we'd like to change our work hours because it's more convenient. Well, that impacts the office. So that is a part that they will agree, and this will be written in the minutes of settlement, that this can be shared with their boss. And I will say, specifically, you have a joint session with your boss on this date, if he's available, and let him know that you come to this one conclusion.
Supposing it's a family settlement, division of property or assets, then do they go to the court with these
Yeah.
settlement terms and have a decree executed?
Mm-hmm.
You have to do that?
Yep. Anything contractual, it would have to go, yeah. Okay, and I've talked all about the role of a conflict coach and a mediator. I haven't mentioned anything really. What's my time? 2 more hours? 2 more minutes? Okay, challenges. Watch me talk fast. Basically, this is what I do, guiding the visitor. Moving from blame to contribution.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry. Moving from blame to contribution. Everybody blames the other person. It's always the other's fault. I strongly believe that it takes 2 people to argue, and they've both got different perspectives. Once you get them, and I'll ask people, so what did you contribute? Nothing. It was all their fault, everything. So, okay. Have you talked to anybody else about this conflict? Yeah, my wife. Okay. Go home to her tonight and ask your wife if she thinks you contributed to it. Come back, yeah, I guess I have. Yeah, she said I should have done this, or I could have done that. It's reality. You don't see it in yourself, but it's good. Other people will see it. Actively listen, being present, being curious. All of these things are super important, as I've mentioned. Body language, but don't be fooled by body language, because body language can mean different things to different people in different cultures. If you're in Canada and a police officer stops you and you're looking down like this, instead of in his eyes, no, sir, I didn't do that. Many people would think that you're showing guilt. But in many cultures, you don't look a police officer in the eye, because people that you're showing respect to, you don't look them in the eye. So cultural biases make a big difference. The open-ended question. What's that acronym for open-ended questions?
Beats.
If you don't come up with it, we're going to spend another half hour going through it again.
Peach BFB.
Peach BFB. And what are they? What's the P?
Priorities.
Priorities, perspectives, yep.
Expectations. Assumptions.
Don't read it. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was the
Expectations?
only one who was paying attention.
Nobody else have?
B is
A
value.
is assumption.
B is value. Last one.
Yep.
B is
A.
F is
What's the
fear.
A? Assumptions.
Assumptions.
Yep. I have a lot of, we don't have time, a lot of great stories about assumptions. And we all make them. Okay. And if you have a question, it can be an open one or a closed one. Either one works.